Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 3.5 years following its launch, Arginine has gained traction at home and won plaudits on abroad on a scale that we at the time might scarcely have imagined. It has transformed our thinking about how we produce food and how we do business, and it has presented our industry with a renewed sense of purpose of how we can be different and still make a difference in both a challenging marketplace and a changing world. The story of Arginine in reality goes back some years earlier, when in 2008 our customers around Europe told us it was no longer sufficient for us to say that we were green, we had to prove it as well. As a country with a huge exposure to global markets, exporting in some sectors up to 90% of what we produce to 175 markets around the world, we listened to what they were saying with deadly seriousness. In fact, we went back a second time to the same set of customers in this PwC study, and we studied in detail what they were doing to make themselves more sustainable and what eventually might be their expectations of their suppliers. We discovered that some were doing quite a lot, and that in turn they would expect a lot of their suppliers over time. And so began the journey of Arginine, and a journey that we documented for the first time in our first annual Arginine Sustainability Report this morning. It is a journey that has had many twists and turns, but it is one that from the very outset, that not for a single moment did we doubt we should take, because the case for taking it was simply incontestable. A global population rising relentlessly at 80 million people a year, a middle class rising at double that pace at 150 million people a year, predominantly in Asia, and shifting their dietary habits towards more protein-based foods and thereby accelerating the growth in the global demand for food at an exceptional pace. And a demand that was meeting new supply challenges that the world didn't face before. Falling rates of growth in productivity, no second green revolution, climate change, unpredictable weather events, a world running short of water, with agriculture requiring 70% of its use, and the competing use of land for fuel as well as for food. And this was a challenge that we were facing. The world needed to produce 60% more food over the following 4 decades in order to feed the world, and yet reduce greenhouse gases by a similar order in order to deal with climate change, but agriculture was a major contributor. This is what our customers had themselves begun to grapple with, along with many other global organizations around the world. Financial markets had begun to place a value on it. And of course, there was this irresistible clamor around the world as it talked more and more about climate change, from the Rio Summit in 1992 to the next landmark summit taking place in Paris at the beginning of December. Of course, in presenting the proof, we might simply have pointed to our unique fortuitous island location, washed by the Gulf Stream, temperate climate creating the perfect conditions for some of the richest pasturelands in the world. Or we could have told our customers about, in a world running short of water, how our rain-fed agriculture meant that we had a zero water stress, although some of them probably didn't need to be told that. Or we could have pointed to a country that had been passed over by the Industrial Revolution so that its air quality is amongst the highest in the world. And bringing that all together, in 2011, the European Commission would publish research which showed that our dairy industry, which is the largest component of our food industry, had the joint lowest carbon footprint across the whole of the European Union. But we knew that it would never be sufficient, that in meeting the needs of the present without sacrificing the world's future needs, it would never be acceptable that we should rely on the attributes that have been naturally bestowed on us after all. We would be held to account for our custodianship of those resources. So in June 2012, we resolved that Ireland should be a world leader in sustainability, and we launched Arginine. And we defined what a leader should be. We set ourselves 4 conditions that we would need to meet. And the first of these was that we should bring everyone on a journey, that every single farm and food manufacturing business would sign up to the sustainability agenda, that by the end of 2014, 75% of our food and drink exports would come from farms and food businesses around the journey, and that by 2016, all would be on a journey. The second condition was that we would measure all of the key things that mattered in the world today. The third was that the way we measured it would not be by our measures or our standards, they would be by international standards that would have international acceptance through the use of internationally accredited schemes and independent verification where they didn't exist. And finally, this was not just going to be a program about measurement, but it would be one of continuous improvement. We were in effect, although we didn't position it as such, at the time launching the first national sustainability scheme in the world, because this was, after all, a voluntary program. But we weren't starting from scratch. This was a journey in many ways that had already begun, with an infrastructure that we had already in place, a team of auditors visiting 20,000 farms and food businesses across a range of enterprises every year. They were making assessments on things like food safety, traceability, animal health, animal welfare, and certain environmental measures as well. We would now go and add the other sustainability measures that were becoming more important in the world today, as you can see on this slide. And we would expand the program deeper and more widely, covering all our primary enterprises. We engaged with the Carbon Trust in the UK, and we learned, together with TAGS, the Agricultural Food Development Authority, how to carbon footprint a farm during a routine audit. And we developed separate carbon footprint calculation models for all of our primary enterprises, and we had them accredited from the Carbon Trust to the PAS 2050 standard. And all of the audits and all of the schemes within which these models will be used are accredited to the ISO 17065 standard, meeting our third condition. This is how it works. An audit arrives on farm, switches on a handheld device, which signals to a central database the commencement of the audit and its exact geographic positioning. Detailed information is then downloaded from on-farm records, from an interview with the farmer, and from walking the farm. Following completion of the on-farm audit, further information is then downloaded in respect of that individual farm from two national databases. The AIM national database held by the Department of Agriculture, which holds details on every animal on each individual farm in real time. And the second database, the ICBF Cattle Breeding Federation database, which holds information about the genetic profile of the farm. All of this data and all of this information is processed, and an audit report, including the carbon footprint of the farm, together with its performance compared with peers, is generated and passed back to the farmer, so that the farmer can now work to explore how he can improve his performance in the future. All farmers also have access to this carbon navigator tool developed by TAGS and by Borbia, so that using the outputs from the farm audit, the farmer can set new targets across each of the measures that have informed the carbon footprint of the farm, and witness by how much, by achieving those targets, the farm's carbon footprint can be reduced and the farm's profitability increased at the very same time. To date, we have 45,000 beef farms accounting for 90% of our beef production that are part of the Origin Green programme, audited and carbon footprinted every 18 months. We are halfway through the first cycle of covering all 18,000 dairy farms, and we will have all of their 100% of the milk covered at some stage during the coming year. We are also continuously auditing all of the other primary enterprises, and we are adding the new sustainability measures into them, and will be well underway by the end of next year as well. In total, we have undertaken 90,000 carbon assessments on farms to date, and in this, we believe Ireland is already a world leader. There is no other country in the world that is carbon footprinting its farms on a routine basis, on effectively a national scale, and in the process of measurement, feedback, and continuous improvement. But it's not just about sustainability on the farm, although that's where our work began, because that's where 75 to 80% of the emissions arise. In June 2012, we also launched the Arginine Charter to enable food and drink manufacturing firms to demonstrate their sustainability credentials. This is how that works. Every food and drink manufacturing firm creates a 3 to 5 year sustainability development plan. They identify the key target areas most relevant to their business. They agree a baseline period, they set timelines and targets, and following independent verification by SGS, itself a world leader in certification services, they're accepted as a member, and they file an annual progress report against those targets, which which is also the subject of independent verification. In the plan, targets have to be set across the 3 levels that you see on that slide: in raw material sourcing and manufacturing process and social sustainability. To date, these are the 122 members, their logos, who are fully verified members of the Origin Green programme, and they are working towards delivery on their targets. I don't expect you to read it. We have a total community of 474 companies that have registered in the Origin Green programme. They account for 90% of our exports. The 122 account for 85% of our exports. And in between, there's about 352 companies at various stages of plan development and verification. To help companies prepare their plans, we run ongoing workshops. We provide one-to-one supports, and we've created this web platform for the entire community of almost 500 registrants where they can learn and share best practice as they prepare their plans and seek to deliver on their targets. In September 2013, we recruited these 10 Origin Green ambassadors, affiliated them to the Smofford Graduate School of Business, where they were inducted into sustainability and funded by these 8 leading Irish companies and by Board BN. From January 2014, they were placed with host organisations for 6 months, 3 6-month placements around the world. And there they worked on sustainability projects, they learned best practice, and they shared the message of Origin Green. Their placements were with global organisations around the world whose logos, some of which you see up here on this slide. Many of those are present here today in the room, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for all of the work that you have done in helping us advance this programme. They have now been succeeded by a new cohort of Origin Green ambassadors, and both the former and the new ambassadors, although I think you always stay an ambassador once you are one, are here in the auditorium with us today, and I hope that you will meet many of them in the course of today and tomorrow. They are as dashing and debonair and as dynamic as the first cohort. They are a valuable resource. They are talented people who were chosen from a pool of 400 to 500 applicants. And we would welcome any discussions with anyone here today who would like to work with us as a host organisation in the period ahead. This is a business initiative, and so we've been sharing the story of Origin Green with an informed business audience at international trade fairs through the international media around the world. And over the last 6 months, over 2.5 million people have visited the Origin Green experience, which was the central feature at the Irish Pavilion at Expo Milan, where along with 144 other countries from around the world, for 6 months, they addressed the theme of feeding the planet energy for life. Origin Green is a model of collaboration, and the sheer scale on which it now operates today could never be possible without a huge amount of collaboration, the many contributions of a whole host of stakeholders and organisations here and around the world, and making progress together, working in a real sense that we are all in this together. And that is perhaps where today's Origin Green report, our first sustainability report, is so important. Perhaps as the first in a series of annual statements, its greatest value may be in serving as a baseline for subsequent reports. But in more than 100 pages, it sets out some of the achievements and activities to date and a whole range of data that's been generated by the programme. So in a sense, it opens up a new range of possibilities and sets out the scope of what could or should be our future ambition. And one range of possibilities, turning to the report itself, is, for example, illustrated by this chart, which shows the carbon distribution of the 45,000 beef farms that are part of the Origin Green programme. With an average carbon footprint of 12 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilo of beef live weight, there is a very significant range around the mean, from 5 kilos up to 20 kilos, excluding the extreme outliers. And our analysis shows that if all of those farms with a carbon footprint above the average were to move in line with the average, it would reduce agriculture's emissions in this country by 500,000 tonnes and by 3%. The same applies in the case of the dairy sector, which we have already noted has the joint lowest carbon footprint in the European Union. If all of the farms with a carbon footprint higher than the average were to move in line with the average, another 500,000 tonnes or 3% would be reduced from agriculture's emissions. And so it goes without saying that bringing those two together, bringing all farms above the average to in line with the average, would save 1.1 million tonnes and knock 6% of our emissions in Irish agriculture. The report features a range of case studies, 4 case studies of beef farms from different parts of the country with different production systems, all utilising the existing knowledge and technologies, and all, as you can see from this picture, generating carbon footprints that are significantly below the average. And the Carbon Navigator tool can point all farms in that direction. Clearly, it can be done. Water is a major global issue, as we know, for world agriculture, but not for Ireland. Internationally published figures would indicate that 16,000 litres of water are required to produce 1 kilo of beef live weight. Our work with Cranfield University has shown that in Ireland, that figure is little more than half, 8,700 litres. And what's more important, 99.5% of that water falls from the sky. And it would happen anyway, irrespective of whether the grazing animals were there to capture it or not. That doesn't mean that water isn't important to us, and all of our assessments do monitor water usage and rainwater harvesting, and of course, the importance of protecting our watercourses on farms. It's been noted that 40% of the world's economy is derived either directly or indirectly from biological resources, hence the importance of biodiversity. We use proxy measures for biodiversity because there are no significant international standards, so we measure things like tree planting in areas of habitats and conservation on farms, hedgerow management, and membership of agri-environmental schemes. And we don't have enough data yet from our audits to generate a progress report, but we are working with other organisations, collaborating organisations like Tagisk and Birdwatch, and we're also working with the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan, which was recently published, an innovative plan focusing on the next 5 years to reverse the decline in pollinators in this country, which contribute over €50 million to Irish agriculture and is critical to its survival. Moving from farms to factories, since the launch of Arginine Green in June 2012, we started with just 7 members, as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide. 7 members, albeit accounting for 21% of our food and drink exports. Looking to the right-hand side, that is now 122 verified members, accounting for 85% of our food and drink exports. And in between, as we've heard, 352 companies working on their plan development and verification. But we're only reporting today on the work and activities of the verified members. Every verified member has to set targets in each one of the 3 levels of raw material sourcing, manufacturing process, and social sustainability. But there is latitude then within each separate level. The figures you see on the right-hand side of this chart give a flavour of some of the elements within the manufacturing process. And again, bear in mind that every company has to set a target in each individual element. Those that have, in this instance, would lead, assuming their targets will be achieved, to a reduction of €12 million in energy usage, 14,000 tonnes less general waste being generated, and €17 million less in water usage by 2017 compared to the base year. And the base year is generally 2012, although it may vary in some of the charts that I now show you to being 2011 or 2013. Every company has to set a target in raw material sourcing. The 122 members have set 164 raw material sourcing targets. 83 are committing to source from suppliers with recognised certifications. They could, for example, be from Fair Trade or RSPO, responsible sourcing of palm oil, or from Borbia's own schemes. As you can see on the right-hand side, 6.5 billion litres are targeted to be sourced from our Sustainable Dairy Assurance Scheme by 2017, which in effect is all on milk. 39 members have committed to developing specific sustainability initiatives with their suppliers. And the report illustrates a range of case studies in the dairy and the beverages and in the seafood sectors of what companies are doing in the area of raw material sourcing. Turning to manufacturing and starting with energy usage, 97 members have set 138 targets, which have already led to a reduction of 11% in energy usage per unit of output by 2014. That will rise to 16% by 2017, generating savings of 12 million a year by then, with the largest reductions set to take place per unit of output in horticulture and meat. And there are examples from the dairy and meat sector of case studies in regard to that in the report. Many small to medium-sized members have focused their attention on energy usage in terms of setting their targets in this area, and that will contribute to a reduction in overall emissions. But some larger, in fact 38 companies, have set emissions reductions targets. And that will result, if the targets are achieved by 2017, to 37 million kilos less emissions and 3.9% less in total. But this is an expanding industry at the present time, so that corresponds to a 10% reduction per unit of output that has already been achieved. That will rise to 26% by 2017. And again, the biggest reduction is being recorded in the beverage sector, although in per unit of output, it's the dairy sector that is set to generate the greatest results. Less water will be used in absolute and relative terms as well. 1.9 million cubic meters less will be used by our companies by 2017. That's a 24% reduction per unit of output, and it generates a 17 million euro saving for the 74 companies involved, with the largest reduction in absolute terms of 21% being recorded for prepared foods companies. And again, there are some case studies in the report that show how this is being done. Turning to waste, 87 companies have set 119 targets, which have already resulted in 38% less waste going to landfill. That will rise to 49% by 2017. In per unit of per output food terms, it will rise to 57%, and also there's a target to generate 14,000 tons less general waste. And all companies are well advanced in terms of the achievement of their targets in this area. Under biodiversity, companies set targets to improve biodiversity on their sites, or they work to see how their production process can serve to protect or enhance existing biodiversity. 31 companies, which is 1 in 4, have set 46 targets on biodiversity, and the areas that they've been focusing on is the development and protection of habitats and the planting of trees and shrubbery. And there are really excellent examples in the report of what companies are doing, really an awful lot in this area, those that are doing them, and more companies are committing to biodiversity as we receive their plans over time. Finally, social sustainability. Every company has to set targets on social sustainability. 208 targets have been set, 132 community-based targets, 27 on health and nutrition, and 36 companies have set 49 employee wellbeing targets. And again, case studies from free eggs to local charities every week of the year. Major nutrition project in Zambia, a model farm project in Haiti, and health and nutrition projects in the prepared foods and snacks sectors. The launch of Origin Green has marked the beginning of a remarkable journey, and our ambition to be a world leader remains on track. Today's report paints a picture, a vision of what the industry could be looking like in 2025. A model of food production that is generating positive economic and social contributions, and one that nevertheless, where farms are busier than ever and biodiversity thrives in the countryside. For now, we still have much to do. While we still have much to do in bringing all of our farms and food businesses into the programme by 2016, we also recognise that the conditions that we sought to fulfil in setting us out on this journey may not necessarily be the same conditions that will keep us there into the future. And so we have created a new set of goals and priorities to guide our work in the period ahead. And the first of these is that we have an unswerving focus now on lowering our environmental footprint, prioritising those 3 areas of emissions: biodiversity and water quality. The second is that we enhance our impact on society with a singular focus on health and well-being. The third is that we close the loop at home and we extend the programme to retail and food service, and we create a showcase of sustainability in which everyone can be involved. The fourth goal or priority recognises that none of this will be possible without an unprecedented degree of collaboration to improve performance. And the final goal is about sharing the story with a wider audience so that we can maintain our momentum in the period ahead. As an example of what we mean by lowering our environmental footprint, the report shows, for example, that a 10% reduction in our beef industry's carbon footprint would make it the most carbon efficient in Europe and would generate €300 million in additional on-farm income every year. It is a huge prize, and some may regard it as too hard to do. But on the principles of applying the Carbon Navigator tool not just to an individual farm, but to what we might describe as a national farm, the report sets out the technical improvements that would be necessary in order to achieve it. It would make a major statement about the industry's future viability and its license to operate in an increasingly challenging world. Health and well-being is without a doubt the single biggest long-term driver of change in markets today. And in a world where people increasingly recognize the link between diet and health, where there's a huge focus on obesity, or diabesity as it is sometimes referred to, in young children as well as in adults, it is critical that our industry is seen to be part of the solution and not be perceived as part of the problem. And so we are prioritising health and well-being, and in future, all member plans will contain a health and well-being target. 27, as we might have noted, have done so far. Ireland can be a showcase of sustainability. We've shown how much can be done already. Accordingly, we have already tailored our Arginine Charter for use in retail and food service. A pilot program will commence very shortly, and we will be ready to roll it out across the entire sector in the first half of 2016. Collaboration is absolutely critical in order to deliver the superior performance that is going to be required in the future. And today's event here in this room and the workshops that take place tomorrow are a critical part of the collaborative network that we believe can sustain us in our work in generating the kind of superior improvement that we will require in the period ahead. We're all in the same journey, and innovation is going to be critical, and that can come from this kind of collaboration. The response of the international community, including the global food and beverage companies that have been host to our Argent Green ambassadors, our international customer base, and everyone who's come in contact with the program, has played a major part in motivating our program and maintaining the momentum. But we recognize as well that maintaining that momentum now and into the future may require that we share our story with a wider audience. We launched Origin Green as a business-to-business initiative. There is no logo. There's no consumer logo. But we have been doing some work in this area, and we realize that eventually there will be merit in sharing our story, and perhaps sooner rather than later in some instances, with a wider audience.